My name is Kelly King. I work for the state of Illinois. I am the adoption program. I started as a monitor. I made myself a manager because they kept giving me additional work. And they continue to do that as we go. I first want to start by telling you guys I'm going to really be mindful of my time, because if you have spent any time with me, you know I talk a lot. And that means I'm also going to have to talk fast. And because Bob had me out so late last night, I'm also very caffeinated right now. So, as part of my job, I am over all of our post-adoption services across the entire state. As part of the post-adoption services, we have therapy, mentoring services. We do follow-up adoptions when parents are deceased. I'm also manage the adoption listing service. So Thomas, I'm going to be talking to you. I also manage some of the smaller contracts. So I have grant contracts. We do small things that are more fee for service, such as therapeutic daycare, which has been a very difficult thing, because if your state is like mine, therapeutic daycare doesn't really exist. But this project is focused more on my grant programs, because I have no control over them because they have a set fee. So my project was about quality assurance. As Sharon Liz said, I'm all about quality, because our post-adoption services are really pretty good, but I'm always trying to make them better. And I meet with our supervisors across the entire state on a quarterly basis, so I can make sure we're constantly trying to figure out how to improve our services. So, post-adoption services include adoption support and preservation services. That's who I'm going to mostly be talking about today. Our post-adoption, adoption support and preservation services include the mentoring programs. It includes individual therapy, group therapy. They have support groups. They do some educational advocacy. They do a lot of case management. And so they consist of clinical staff that are therapists. They consist of the case managers as well. So I also want to talk about another national pilot that we've been a part of, because that formed this project so much. So I'm going to be using a lot of acronyms. I will try to spell them out first. So if you guys get lost at some point, remember that and ask me questions later. So the project that we're a part of is the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Edition. So very long, so they just call it NTI. So the NTI is basically an online training program that it works towards getting staff adoption competent. They have the mental health one, and then they have a child welfare and child supervisor one. And in that training, it talks a lot about trauma. It talks a lot about how trauma affects mental health. It talks about the type of services that staff should be looking for. It talks about loss and grief and how we should understand that moving from their bio parents leads to loss and grief, and cultural competency. So I just want to tell you right now, it's a very large training, 25 hours at least, but all the staff love it. And from there, I took a ton of information. There was a ton of resources in there that talked about what might make us adoption competent, what we need to be working towards. And even before I got started in the PLD program, I had already decided, I think all my staff need to have the NTI training, but we also need to figure out how to develop a training curriculum, because our last training curriculum that was put together was 20 years ago. And it's called the Silver Box. And they still have VHS tapes inside this box. That's how old it is. So each agency basically over time has just been adding and incorporating their own things. But again, the services aren't consistent across the state, because now even though they're good trainings, people are doing different things. So I have parents who are asking me about certain trainings from one side of the state that don't do those trainings. Because if you guys have not realized, our adoptive and foster parents are very knowledgeable. They will go seek out information and bring you back. So because of that, I decided that I wanted to make sure that all the parents across the state would have access to the same level of services. And that is how this all got started. My full goal is to make sure that we are lowering our disruption rates. So if you talk to anybody in Illinois that knows about our disruption rates, they'll tell you that we have a 0.1% disruption rate from adoption, based off of the data that we have. But we know that data isn't correct. So that was part of my initial issue, because I wanted to track the improvements in disruption, but I can't do that if I don't even know what the actual disruption numbers are to begin with. So I added that as part of this project as well, which also gave me extra work. But it's okay, we're figuring it out. So after having done a lot of the research from the NTI and just my own background research, the data tells us that these particular trainings are the most adoption competent trainings and what they should be working on with our kids. So they include attachment regulation competency, trust-based relational intervention, some form of a trauma-based and adoption competency training, neurosequential model of therapeutics, dyadic developmental psychotherapy. So I'm also going to be using acronyms for them because they're all long. I just wanted you to get a full view of it. For the purposes of this project though, because what I'm trying to do is so large, I had to focus on one thing at a time. And so initially, I wanted to start on ARC, because ARC is a basic framework that everybody who's doing clinical services should know about when working with kids who have had trauma. So, my initial PICO was not my final PICO, as most of you probably know. My initial PICO was if post-adoption therapists receive consistent, trauma-informed, culturally and adoption competent training, will it increase therapist knowledge and clinical skills based on adoptive families' needs? Now, initially I thought I had time because thanks to Jen, she somehow magically got ARC approved for me. She thinks she wasn't a good mentor, but I can assure you that that is not true. But, you know, things move slowly. So I couldn't quite get the funding and everything in place on time, so we didn't have a chance to actually set the training up. So my project became more research and data driven. And so my final PICO was if we are able to collect data through assessment of therapists and mental health providers' needs, as well as quality assurance contacts of parental needs, we will be able to develop a thorough training program for the providers to ensure that parents are receiving the education and services to best help their families' well-being and safety. So basically, as a summary, I wanted to do assessments from the parents' needs, and I wanted to do assessment of what our therapists already knew about some cultural competency training, trauma training, and about the ARC, since ARC was going to be our first start. But my long-term goal is if we train the post-adoption preservation therapists with consistent trauma-informed and adoption-competent training, can the adoption and guardianship families have more stability and well-being and decrease disruptions? So that's obviously something we're going to have to track over a longer period of time. So this is definitely going to go beyond the NPOD program. So, obviously I had challenges, and I'm going to start with that first. I just told you guys in the beginning, I kept getting more and more and more things to do. So it just was it's been a busy year. And we are lacking staff. There were changes in administration, which is a constant for Illinois. And because we were lacking staff, it was hard for me to get in contact with the parents, because every year I always do quality assurance calls anyway as part of my monitoring, but it just kind of was not as easy as it's been in the past. And like I said, I didn't have real access to any numbers of disruption rates that were probably correct. So these are my do, study, and act pieces. I put together a needs assessment for the parents and the therapists. I had my great team of people, Jen and her staff, and Sharon Lynn, take a look at it and give me some feedback on it. And then as part of the study, I assessed those surveys. I actually did do SurveyMonkey. So I didn't put it together myself. So I'm with you, Thomas. I'm not all that good with the surveys. But I did use SurveyMonkey to send out to the therapists. But with the parents, I mostly did phone calls and emails because I've now had the staff try to get emails from the parents because we do these quality assurance constantly. And then I assessed how to start tracking our disruption rates and what our current disruption rates actually said. And then I researched the training and the articles that I had available. And then I discussed the training needs with my supervisors. And we're kind of in the process of already starting to put together a program. And I also talked about it with our training department, who is on board with it 100%. So the therapist assessment, I got 86 responses back from our therapists across the state, partially because they think I'm their boss and they do what I tell them to do. But also I just have a really good relationship with the agencies. I'm constantly talking to them. So, and also, as some of you may find out after today, I like to harass people. So, that actually gave me a pretty high number because in general we have about 100 therapists and supervisors across the state anyway. So this was a large amount of population. And then for the parents assessment, I ended up getting 57 responses. A couple more responded back to me after this was done, but my goal was 100, but I was satisfied with my 57. And it was a convenient sample, so whoever actually answered the phone and talked to me was who got asked the questions. And it was from parents across the entire state. And I just wanted to know like what their current concerns were, what their needs for cultural competence services were, and things like that. And I'll go a little bit further into what the questions were later on in my slide. So currently we have about 22,000 open post-adoption cases across the entire state. And this is what we have for disruption rates. There are 118 post-adoption interim subsidies between January 17 and November 2018. Now what an interim subsidy is if a parent is deceased, they will go to their backup caregiver and then they will open the subsidy funding to those parents, to those new guardians, until they can get a new adoption contract signed and completed. So it's really just a temporary thing that's supposed to be 6 months to help them with the transition. So they track those who had open interim orders. The one issue with that is not all guardians get interim orders. It doesn't always happen. So even though we're tracking that still doesn't cover everybody whose placement disrupted. Also, some of the kids come back into care. So we can't really determine if those kids, what happened with them. So with the next one is 257 cases were reopened under the same ID number. So in Illinois, we get new ID numbers when we go to adoption, which is very frustrating, but that's neither here nor there. And then if they come back into care, they still carry that same case. The issue with that number is, even though they're reopened, some of them are reopened for our scholarship program. And so there's no real identification on whether they came back into care, if they were open for other services or what. So that was some of the issues I had with us tracking our disruptions. So what I want to say what I do now about the disruption rate, we already had our agencies tracking every time any one of their cases disrupted or there was a displacement. And that includes even if the parent still has custody of the kid, but they may send them to Aunt Jones because they're having a hard time, or they may do a temporary guardianship. So all those numbers come to me. Extra work, but all those numbers come to me now. But also I got our post-adoption agents, post-adoption workers across the state sending me what we now have as a disruption tracking sheet. And then I track all of those on our Excel sheet. So every time a case disrupts or is displaced, as long as we find out about it, we're able to track it. So the therapist assessment. I did a lot of checking about the demographics. I wanted to know what kind of trainings they already had in the background and like to what level of knowledge they had. Obviously, I wanted to know about their art background because we're doing art right now. I wanted to know their understanding of the SOGI and the sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. The cultural competency. And while I asked about trauma, I wasn't surprised that they had training in trauma because Illinois is a trauma-based state. We're going to talk about trauma all day, every day. So, I will tell you though, the issue with us talking about trauma is great. We understand trauma, but we don't all know what to do about it. And that becomes the issue. We know these kids are traumatized, but now what? And that's one thing I like about NTI because it helps focus on that. So if you guys have not taken NTI, I'm going to do a quick promo of it. So for the therapists, 86% were female. Are you guys shocked that 86% of social workers were female?
Let's look at the room.
The highest age group was between 25 and 34, and then the next was about 35 to 44, which is pretty common across the state. And also, these are our private agencies, so everybody that provides post-adoption services are through private agencies. None of them are with DCFS. So, ethnicity, a large majority of them were Caucasian or white, which kind of goes against the fact that our internal demographics say there are a large amount of African American kids in the system. But next though, 16% of them were African American. So the 86 staff, there were 75% therapists, 3% case managers, 17% clinical supervisors, and 3% managers. And the years of experience, as you can see, most of them were 2 years or less. So the reason why I want to make sure that they're getting this consistent training is that very reason. Social work is a constant moving chess piece. So if we're having all these new people, even though I will tell you with adoption support and preservation agencies, those are more intensive services, and they provide the most for all of our kids across the states. So they have a lot of knowledge and they have a lot of training, but we're still talking about people who've been there for 2 years or less. So I want to make sure that they're getting the right training straight from the door. So when they work with our kids, they will be doing it correctly. And then we're split into regions, although there are a ton of counties, and we make sure that there's an adoption support and preservation agency that covers each county across Illinois. This is our nice map. It's in our post-adoption book. Those numbers identify what agencies cover. So in the post-adoption book, it actually has a little key so they can determine where they can go for services. As far as the level of education, most of our staff have a master's degree because you have to have a master's degree to provide therapy. Most of them were in psychology and social work. And a large majority of them had some form of clinical license because a lot of them required a therapist to be working on or to have their clinical license. So we talked a little bit about training. And so I wanted to know how much training or how much knowledge and training they had. So EMDR, about 55% of the therapists had some knowledge and training. TheraPlay, NMT, surprisingly, because NMT is a very intensive type of training, but as you can see, they have a lot of, at least 1 day training, some knowledge of NMT training. Circle of Security, and the adult attachment interview. And these are some of the trainings that we're going to be working on moving forward with the staff, because not only did I do the research, but because I meet with them quarterly, I asked the supervisors what kind of training they thought was beneficial to the parents and the families that they work with. So that's going to be included in our training moving forward. So I'm not going to read through all the questions because I'm limited on time, and you guys have them in your book, and I'm just going to summarize each page what the therapist questions are about. On this page, it's mostly just about working with adoption families, understanding trauma and mental health, understanding some cultural competency. So that was the first subset of questions that they had to answer. And as you can see, they had a lot of knowledge about that because, as I said, we're trauma. So that first piece was pretty good. There were some issues with some cultural competency questions, like understanding how to talk with people about when they say race doesn't matter, or things like that. Which you'll find out later, the parents don't seem to fully understand either. But I feel like they need a little bit more knowledge on that. This subset of questions is about intergenerational trauma, complex trauma, and just factors leading to children's exposure to stress and things like that. So that's what a good majority of these questions are about. And again, they know some stuff about trauma and self-soothing and things like that. But what I found was they struggled the most on intergenerational trauma, which is a surprise for me, and complex trauma, which is more of an ARC kind of term, but a lot of them have had some exposure to ARC. And also since we talk about trauma so much, I would think people would know about complex trauma. And this is fully focused on the ARC concepts, these subset of questions. I will tell you, everybody knew the 3 domains of ARC. Well, not everybody. About 96 to 98% knew what those were because they had exposure to it. But they weren't able to give key skills or areas of focus for things like attunement or the areas of development that these focuses should really work on. So obviously they need a little bit more in-depth understanding in trauma. The supervisors had a lot of knowledge on it, but a lot of the therapists didn't necessarily have some information on it. So the therapist scored the highest on the ARC question, and so did the supervisors. But like I said, they struggled with intergenerational and complex trauma. So those seem to be the most difficult questions for them. And the reason why I wanted to know this is because even though ARC is a framework, it's very flexible and it will work more on things that they need to know. It can be a focus type training in which they are able to get as what they actually need out of it. So we wanted to know the areas where they struggled in a bit. The executive directors and managers, we pulled data from them, but there were only a few of them, so I didn't have a large sum of data about that. But the staff did well in trauma questions, like I said, and they just need a little bit more information on color blindness and some more updated ARC. So the parent questions. So Sharon Lynn asked me to do a little skit on what my phone calls sound like. So, in general, I will call a parent and say, "Hi, my name is Kelly King. I'm calling from Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. I am the adoption program manager. I just want to check in with our parents about services with A, B, and C. And I was wondering if you had time to just answer a few questions about how the services were going because we want to make sure we're improving them." So that's how all the phone calls started off. Surprisingly, everybody said yes who answered the phone. I was shocked. Or at least they would call me back, and they actually called me back. People want to talk about services. But again, like I said, I do this every year. So some of them knew me. a lot of people know me because in Illinois, people think that I'm over everything adoption related. You cannot convince them otherwise. So that worked out well. And also I think I realized when doing these quality assurance calls that people want to be followed up with. They want to be able to talk to somebody. They don't want to feel completely abandoned after the adoption is completed. So if you're sounding like somebody who's willing to actually listen to them, they're going to talk to you. But this time these questions were more intense than what I usually do. Usually I just say, how are the services? Any concerns? Moving right along. If they don't have any concerns, I thank them for talking to me. But these, I had a lot more in-depth questions because I wanted to know, I didn't want to know how the services were. I wanted to know if they were still participating. I wanted to know what some of their concerns were. I wanted to know if they felt that they were getting culturally competent services. And in general, I wanted their opinion on what they thought a therapist needed to effectively work with adoptive families. I got a lot of answers on that. So I ended up receiving responses from 57 parents. 33 of them were still participating in the services. But those who were not, some of them were just due to wanting to take a break. Some of them were completed with the program. Their goals were attained. Some of them had issues with the therapist or the provider. Some of them ran out of time because the adoption support and preservation services can only go up to 2 years before a 6-month break needs to happen. They're definitely time limited in comparison to our other programs. But a lot of them end up coming back. And 3 of them we just didn't get an answer. Out of those parents, 42 stated that services were either good or excellent. And then the reasons they were seeking behavior, a good majority of them were because of behavior issues. Parents just don't know what to do with these behaviors. They are not prepared really at all for this information, which is also part of the reason we've been begging, I'm looking at Melinda, for a parent portion of the NTI training. But they just don't know. They're not prepared. They're not prepared to work with the kids. And even though we have pride training and all this other stuff, they take pride training and then 10 years passes and then they're like, well, now what do I do? And when our kids are coming to adoption support and preservation, we call it ASAP. So I'm just going to call it ASAP from this point forward. But when they come to ASAP services, it is when they are fed up and they have no other options and they are calling trying to get rid of this kid. And our goal now is to promote these services so much that they're coming at the very beginning, which was another pilot program we're working on, but we don't have time to talk about that. But we are trying to do some education with the parents from the very beginning. But others are just attachment issues, which are normal with kids who've experienced trauma. Adoption is what they call it, adoption issues, which probably includes attachment issues, loss and grief, and other things that come with adopting a child. Processing grief, processing trauma, those were some of the common things. And then I asked if some of them were considering disruption before they started services. 13 said yes. Surprisingly, and I'm so happy every time I talk to somebody, 39 of them said no. I get so many people ready to give up their kids, and I would ask them that, and their answer was literally, oh God, no, I would never do such a thing. So I was pretty happy about that answer. But of those 13 people who said yes, 3 did actually disrupt. And 2 of them were in the process of trying to seek out other options. And so when they disrupt, it doesn't necessarily mean they come back into care. They might have placed them in a residential facility. They still have custody of them. They're just seeking a higher need of services. I also asked them if their issues were addressed. 6 reported that they weren't. 4 reported that they were ongoing, but 47 stated that the issues that they initially came in were addressed. 45 parents thought that the therapist did have the skills to address those issues. But for those who didn't have the skills, they thought they just needed further training on developmental diagnosis, or they thought maybe that therapist just wasn't a good fit for their family. A lot of it, I found out, people want to know more about fetal alcohol syndrome and things like that, because our therapists don't necessarily have the training on that, and they would love it. They've asked me about it for a while, so I'm trying to figure out how they can get more developmentally appropriate services as a part of it too. If you have not been able to tell so far, my therapist and the supervisors are constantly asking me for training. I don't know why they love it so much, but they do. So I also found that a lot of our parents are very knowledgeable about therapeutic techniques. So TBRI, TheraPlan, EMDR are some of the trainings that they said they already knew before coming to counseling, and they wanted to work on with their kids. 8 of the parents reported that they didn't see any improvements. 19 of those families were transracial. 25 of the families said that their therapist was the same race as them. And even the ones that weren't the same race. A lot of them told me that they thought that race didn't make a difference one way or another, which in my head made me realize we're trying to train the therapists on cultural competency, but maybe we need to train parents too on the importance of cultural competency. And then what do you think a therapist needs to know to effectively assist adoptive families? The number one answer was child and family's history. They want them to know the background. And some of the other ones were attacking trauma-based theories, knowledge about mental health. They want them to be compatible, about medications, cultural competency, dealing with loss and grief. They want them to have patience with them, work with them as individuals as opposed to seeing everybody as the same. And they want the ability to confront the kids, because some people think that therapists are just too nice, what they call soft, quote unquote. So we learned that, as I said, parents didn't seem to have any real care for the cultural competent piece. The therapist lacked some aspects of art. Parents are overall satisfied with services, even though I think we still should be improving them. In general, they were satisfied. But also, since I've been a part of all these pilots, I realized there's no real consistency across the entire country for what adoption competency training really is before this NTI training came out. So again, plug, take NTI. And then there was difficulty tracking disruptions, which we started doing. Some of this stuff I already told you guys about. The change in administration just makes this very hard. And yesterday I was talking to Renee and Bob about coming through the back door to get things done. That is what I do every day. That is this period. And it gets done. It happens because once they see the benefit in it, they can't really deny it. Funding, obviously. And then the legislation changes. Family First held this up for a little while because we had to use well-supported trainings and things like that, and Family First wasn't fully together. So my short-term goals are to set up training with Dr. Glassstein, who's over ARC, which we've already started doing. I'm going to meet with our training department so I can put a foundations training in, because I think they also don't have any foundational knowledge of the child welfare system. Our child welfare workers have foundations training, but the therapists, the people who actually do the clinical work, don't fully understand the process of the way child welfare works. And then obviously the clinical trainings that I'm going to be doing. We're going to be promoting the services more. We're ensuring that the disruption rates are tracked more appropriately. And ensuring that all the therapists have the same training across the state. That is really my long-term goal at this point, is really to update our training. So how did NPOD impact me? I will say that number one, I definitely feel more confident in my leadership, which is why I've now been getting away with sneaking in the back door. And also, just having this backing of this training, of this program in general, has given this such a push. And I've been able to really work with Jen, who has been very, very helpful in moving a lot of this stuff forward. I cannot thank her enough. And I was able to make good connections with everybody here. I was able to learn a lot of information that I think I'm probably going to be able to take back to my state. And it encouraged me to learn my own management skills and to be able to assist everybody else in transformational leadership. So, these are my references, and I am finally done.